The insurance company?
No, the city of Detroit.
Oh, and you lost your insurance?
We lost a lot of stuff.
Oh, I imagine.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and get going. So today, what I wanted to do is to see, first of all, if we can cover two sections, poverty, avarice and poverty, because those are kind of two sides of the same coin, as it were.
Yep.
And then last week,
Rebecca's
Rebecca,
friend.
yeah, well, Rebecca had mentioned, she said, well, we spent a lot of time on chastity, but we didn't talk much about lust. And I'm thinking, you're absolutely right. So she said, maybe that's something that we could talk about tonight. So I was thinking, I don't like going over ground that we already covered, but maybe we can spend a few minutes, if you want to, we can talk about lust. That was actually the whole chapter last week was lust and chastity. We spent a lot of time talking about chastity, what chastity was, how we apply it in our lives, but really didn't talk much about lust. So I thought maybe we'll pick up there. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it, and then we'll go ahead and get into the two topics for tonight, the avarice and the poverty. Okay, so how does that sound?
Sounds good.
So when he talks about lust, okay, he spends a lot of time on a couple of different, I guess, issues that they deal with quite a bit in the monastery related to lust. And I remember back in my previous life, what we used to say is, if you look once, you're admiring the beauty of God's creation. You look twice, it's lust. One of those things. We always had that. But it's not so much the number of times you look. It's what that produces in your mind. And even as he's talking about in the section here, when he talks about dreams and what was it? Yeah, dreams, fantasies, and emissions. There on page 127. When he talks about that, that's something that you're not actually looking at something and seeing, but what you're doing is recalling it, right? So especially if you're thinking about in terms of a big problem that we have in this day and age, which is pornography, and a lot of people, and I was surprised to read that women are not nearly much as men, but women are heavily addicted to pornography. And I always thought about it as like a man's thing, like the girly magazines and stuff like that. That's what I always thought. But actually, there's a lot of women who are addicted to pornography. Now, I guess the question is, what would define an addiction? I mean, it's kind of like I know it when I see it. But I mean, what is that?
If it's taking the place of, let's say, your family's needs.
Okay, so
Instead of spending your money on food for the baby and so on, you're spending it on your addiction.
okay, but what happens if it's not? What happens if I say I have enough money, maybe I'm cheap and I look at only the free stuff?
Okay, then it's taking away from the time from your child.
It's taking away from your prayer life and your prayer.
Okay, taken away from
Better
prayer.
answer.
But what also is it? What is this a substitute for?
Substitute.
For maybe
Well,
real sorry?
affection for
Okay.
your wife or
For your
whoever
wife.
you're supposed to be with.
Or for other real people, right?
Yeah.
What it is it's a redirection of those affections. If it's your wife, your spouse, your husband, then yeah, certainly that is wrong. But I mean, just in general, what it does for the standpoint we're talking about, the standpoint of pornography, is that it really ruins those relationships, those ideas that you have of other people, whether it's your spouse or just your other human beings. I would even put it down to that point. So as we're talking about that from dreams, it's one of those things where it's replaying in your head, right? So that's how that lust is built up. Now, you might say in relationship to chastity, I mean, what's worse? I might lust after something or someone, but I'm not going to act on that.
But you're acting on it when you're thinking about it and
Okay.
you're lusting it. You already have acted on it.
So where does that come from? Where do we hear that?
That you've already, when
Yeah.
you're lusting, you already have.
Right.
I forgot.
Okay. Maybe in
I
that
thought
wrote this.
thinking about it and then comes the act. First you think it. and
Well,
then you say
let me
it.
ask you this: What happens? What happens if you
So
say
it's a
I
two-step process.
can
Thinking
about
it,
it?
you can't sometimes help it. You
I can fantasize. I can look at it, do whatever else, but I'll never act on it. So the question is, what's the problem with that?
But you've already acted on it by having the thoughts. It wasn't you just admired God's creature. Now you're lusting after God's creature. Didn't we do that? Oh my gosh. When we were doing the religious studies class at the front of the church. Oh gosh. Yes, with Brian and Susan and myself and a couple other people, when you would come out from the altar before Sunday.
Oh, yeah, wow, that was a while back.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I can't remember who it was. I can't remember who the name was.
What we were studying is
When we
that,
were looking at the Three Hierarchs, we touched on it. You
Oh,
had given us,
yeah, that
you
one
had
about-
given us, Brian and myself, a couple of books, and it was in there in detail.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
can't put my finger on it.
I can't think of it either. But, yeah, but so the whole point of this is, and that's why I wanted to pull this out here, I'm looking at Matthew 5:28, and this is probably pretty familiar to most people. I'm going to start in 27. This is Jesus talking. He says, you have heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. Right? Now, that's one of the 10 Commandments. Here's 28. But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her, not in his mind, not in his eyes, but where? In his heart. And then he goes on, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it out, for it is more profitable for you for one of your members to perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell. Now, of course, we've always known that not to be quite literal. Some people may have taken it like that in the past. But I mean, the whole idea is that if your eyes are causing you to sin like that, then that's something you have to really consider. It's not just like a little dream, a little fantasy, or I always like to think about, some people talk about victimless sins, victimless crimes, or whatever, you know. If I do it, nobody else knows about it, so what's the problem? Well, here it talks about that. So what Christ is worried about is not so much how we act, you know, with our physical body. It's also how we act within our mind or within our heart. So when we're talking about lust, that's where the problem comes in. Now, true, you could say that the memories, those thoughts, are where they all start. I mean, I don't think somebody would just go out and commit adultery without maybe, you know, taking it back a few steps and saying, well, it started out with lust or some other kind of dreams or fantasies that you had, maybe even related to pornography.
But it's not necessarily a sin as if I were to have those thoughts. I mean, those things.
Well, it can be.
It can be, depending how long you dwell on, or if you turn it into lust, or.
Well, anything that takes your focus off of Christ and a life of purity can be considered a sin, because remember, sin is not it's not like there's this master book that says this is a sin, this is a sin, this is a sin. Sin means you're missing the mark.
Okay.
So here's the mark you have to hit, and you're missing it. So if you're fantasizing about anything, even no matter what it can lead to, you're not hitting the mark that you should be.
Because of it, right.
Yeah. So just think of sin, and always think of sin in that manner, and not so much from a this is right, this is wrong type
A lawful
deal.
type.
A lawful thing. Yeah.
And I think it was Father Paisios that talked about when we were talking about those bad thoughts, like planes in a holding pattern circling around, waiting to land. And we know that we're going to be confronted by it, even if we don't go out and look for sin. You know, it's like,
Right.
you know, going out and putting myself in these positions. And,
Right.
you know, we know where we could go if we want to, whatever the sin is. We know where we can go and we can find it. Or we can say, well, it'll find us. But no, we'll find it.
Right.
Even by accident. But the point is that you don't put yourself in there. You know that those little sin planes or whatever those thoughts are circling around all the time. And it doesn't take much, right? I mean, it's one lapse.
Right.
And boom, there they are. Mm-hmm. Now, is that a sin? Yeah, that's a sin. It is. Now, do I act on it? Do I dwell on it? Hopefully not. Maybe not. Well, no, that's, you know, but the point is that is a sin. As Father said, it's missing the mark. The mark is the bullseye. It's that perfection.
Yep.
Because
Be
just like you
perfect
said
as your
about the
Father.
dreams in that, I mean, you can't control your
Well,
dreams.
you can.
Yeah.
You can, but your spiritual life has to be in such a state that sin doesn't come to you when you're. The goal is to pray without ceasing, right? It's very hard to sin while you're praying. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So like some of these monks on Mount Athos, you know, they use the Jesus prayer and they say it so many times throughout their life that they don't even use their lips anymore. And it's just constantly on a there's a book called Way of the Pilgrim, which I'm sure everybody's read, teaching how to do the Jesus prayer, where it just goes on complete autopilot and they're praying constantly while they're working, while they're sleeping, while they're doing all this stuff. And you know, those types of thoughts and fantasies and they can't enter into the mind when you're in a state of prayer. So the goal is to get to that point. It's very hard in the secular life to get to that point, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't make every effort to get there. You know, that's the biggest thing.
I would say with dreams, probably it's not. You wouldn't want to say like having that dream, you've acted sinfully. You know that it's something you should then feel like you've made a mistake or you've done something wrong, but I'd say, you know, probably 99% of the time it's a byproduct of
Something else.
your sinfulness, you know, or
Eating
what
pizza late at night.
Yeah, what you've allowed. What you've allowed into your body.
Gluttony
You know.
and
All of them.
any of the violations of the commandments.
Remember, remember the prayer of absolution for all those sins, whether voluntary or involuntary.
Involuntary.
Right.
It's still a sin.
Yeah.
But it's an
Yeah.
involuntary sin. But you're still you have to fix that.
Right, and I think that's a good point, because the thing, and that's exactly the thing that a lot of us tend to do, is that we kind of take it and we say, oh, wait a minute, that wasn't on purpose.
I
So
can't
that's not a
help
sin.
it.
Yeah, I
Right.
can't help it. Or, you know, this is just a normal reaction. It's natural. You know, I'm gonna look, or I'm gonna say something, or, you know, something like that. And so therefore, it's not a sin because I didn't consciously do it. All right. No, it's still a sin. Now, as Father says, we still have to work towards even eliminating that, so it's not even subconscious.
And when you hear yourself telling yourself that it's a natural thing,
You're lying.
it's completely
Stop it.
unnatural.
Yeah.
You were born natural. You know, I said when
Something
we
greater.
when we baptized Benedict, I said he ceased to become a biological person and he became a human being.
Yeah.
The biggest pet peeve of mine was like, well, you know what? Sin is in human nature. No, it's not.
No, right.
It's in fallen human nature that you created to yourself. But that's very important, is to realize that you're called to something greater, like Bruce said.
Exactly. And so he gives a couple of solutions for it. What are some of the solutions or some of the ways to prevent this sort of lust, this sin?
She
Fasting.
said not eat.
Fasting and the Jesus prayer.
Make sure your prayer is the last thing.
Exactly. So he talks about gluttony. He said, you know, don't eat a lot of food, a lot of rich food. And that kind of seems to be a topic that he has, you know, is that what you eat, really how you eat, how you treat food, how you think about food, seems to translate into other aspects of your life. So if you're lusting after food, maybe that's just an extension of another form of lust or another form of desire that's going to manifest itself in these kind of bad dreams. Also the Jesus prayer. And I'll tell you that for me seems to be the greatest. You know, when I think about something lustful, or a lot of times when I think about something, someone does something to me and my first reaction is, okay, let's start, and it's like, no, and then go back to the Jesus prayer. And I'm absolutely serious. I mean, at first it was tough. At first I'm like, you know, okay, let me say the Jesus prayer, then let me go ahead and think about how I'm going to. But no, just, and after a while, it really does work. If you find yourself, your mind wandering, you know, like I'm walking between meetings or something, wander around the hallway and, you know, I see somebody and that's so, you know, it's like, no, you know, it's like kind of bring it back, even just in the elevator. You know, it's kind of funny because especially when you're in those areas by yourself, you know, the door's closed and the first thing you think about is like, okay, whose neck do I need to grab? You know, something like that. It's like, you know, come on, bring it back. And that's really something that, you know, I fight with, but I found that for me, the Jesus prayer is the absolute best thing. And even when you're getting ready to go to sleep, you know, or when I'm riding in the van, because a lot of times I'll wake up and I can't find my prayer rope because it fell, you know, on the van pull. It's down there on the floor. One time I lost it for 2 days because it got stuck somewhere underneath the seat. But I mean, it's one of those things where it kind of becomes a good habit, I guess. And, you know, some people may say, well, that's rote, that's this, that, and everything else. Yes, but it does absolutely help.
So that's interesting. You talked about people's relationship to food as sort
Yeah.
of a window to your soul. Right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So then if someone like myself who's put on a couple pounds in the last 4 or 5 months needs to go to confession? Should we all get on the scale? Should we all get on the scale before we come into church?
You've sinned this much.
Yeah, that's right.
You've sinned 5% more.
This many pounds.
Orthodox Weight Watchers.
There you go.
Think about it. We're on to something
Yeah.
here.
Well, Bruce, we talked, actually last week we talked about how, the relationship between food and the passions, the fathers knew about this 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
This is why there's fasting rules. This is why you're fasting from certain types of things. This isn't just because they're like, you know what, I just want to tick off a lot of people.
This would be cool.
Or, the meat market has really just, been really mean to me, so I'm going to set it so a couple months out of the year nobody goes to it. It was done out of these, the fathers knew scientifically the chemicals in meat affect the way, and dairy affect the way that you act and your susceptibility to passions and sin and things like that. So this is very real. These
But
are
I
very
bet you
real
they
things.
never could have imagined the digital age.
No.
No.
And so it's interesting how technology has, there's like a secular morality, right? Is sexting, for example, or texting. You do things in your head before you, oftentimes,
Sure.
psychologists have shown that act it out.
Right.
And the affairs often start by, at work, into texting, and then it gets,
Yeah.
and how does that,
Crazy
we're used to thinking, at least in Western secular society, that the physical act, Clinton, I did not have
Right.
relations with that woman.
Right.
And clearly he did.
Right.
But you know what I mean? How we kind of,
Society now
Fake,
has
yeah.
come so complacent with that.
Yeah, it's just a normal.
It's become
all
so
accepted.
normal. Yeah, it's acceptable behavior in society these days.
but to me,
And it's sad.
that's what this is speaking to. It's not necessarily, it's the thought as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
It's not
it's,
just the physical.
yeah, it's not just the physical. And that's why, when Christ is teaching, he's stepping it up to another level. I mean, when you turn around and say, don't commit adultery, and you go, if I didn't commit adultery, it's not
Don't
cool.
think about
Right.
committed adultery.
Yeah, well, it doesn't say I can't think about it. It says thou shalt not do it.
Right.
So then it comes back to, in legalistic terms, it's like, here's the law. You either did or you didn't. You're either guilty or not guilty. Never innocent, you're just not guilty. So it's the same thing with this here. But then now Christ is saying, this is what they said, but this is what they meant. It's a call to make you holier. It's a higher calling. It's not just to be a bunch of people who don't maybe get caught or get seen doing these sins, because it's God who sees what you do, like in the hidden parts of your life, right?
Right.
It's like they say that's how you determine the character of a person. What do they do when nobody's looking? Do you stop for the red light when nobody's looking? Do you wait for the crossing sign and stuff like that? Things like that. What do you do when nobody's looking? That's probably a greater judge of what your character is, because the only people that are going to see it is you and God.
Right.
Nobody else is over there to say, hey, you just broke the law, or you just did something wrong, and rub your nose in it or whatever. But this is something that's between you and God, and now they know. And it's the same thing here. Who will know if you're lusting after somebody, lusting after a woman in your heart?
You will.
You will. God will.
All right.
The woman might never know. Your wife or your spouse may never know.
Right.
Nobody else may never know.
Right.
But God knows, and you know. And those are the kind of things that you need to cleanse out. And it's the same thing he talks about when we were talking about anger, when he says, it says don't kill, don't murder, don't commit murder. But if you say rata to your neighbor, if you hate your neighbor and say something rude to your neighbor, you're killing that neighbor. So again, it's kind of taking it up to a higher notch, and that's what we're called to do. To take it up to a higher notch. Everybody could say in the secular world, well, we don't kill people, we don't commit adultery and all this stuff, so I'm going to heaven, so I don't need a church to tell me that.
Right.
I don't need, all you people to preach at me and tell me not to do it. I just don't do it. Well, okay, that's great. And it's commendable in this day and age, but still, what's in your heart? What are you really thinking?
You're called to more.
Exactly.
I mean, obviously, God doesn't. His goal for us, what He wants, isn't people that, like robots that walk around and follow the rules, but inside they're like raving and ranting like
Oh, yeah.
with hatred,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're called to love. It says love your neighbor, love your enemy, not don't kill them.
Right.
So that's a little
Right.
bit more substantial.
It's a good start, though.
You gotta start there.
That's right.
You'll never get to loving them if you're always killing them first.
That's right. They're very hard to love at that point. Yeah, so he talks about as ways to prevent that, eating, the Jesus prayer, and there was something else that he mentioned. Something else that he mentioned, that one theme that just keeps going throughout the whole, the remembrance of death. Now, here we go again. What is the significance of the remembrance of death? How is that going to keep you from lustful thoughts?
Everybody thought I was crazy when I started talking about the remembrance of death in this parish. Like, God, that guy likes death a lot. There's a reason for it.
Yeah, so why? What do we say? I mean, what's the whole theme of this remembrance of death stuff? Other than being morbid, other than being, kind of dragging around all the time, and someone says, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" "Oh, just remembering death, just remembering death." And they're like, "Oh, boy, he's a great guy to be around, right?" What is the whole idea behind that? It's really the same thing. In each one of these, when he talks about, do this, oh, and don't forget death, because it's always there. Why? What was that? What was the reason for remembering death?
Is it judgment?
The judgment, yeah. In the judgment. It's that big final, it's like the big it. That's it, done, right? Once you're dead, you're dead. Mm-hmm. I mean, in that sense, And so if you're living your life as if this is going to be your last breath, your last second, your last moment, your last day, would you keep that in mind? Not in the morbid sense, but certainly in the judgment and having to face God with all these sins. Do you want to have that sin on your conscience, on your soul, when you go and talk to God? When you come before a perfect God, how is that?
I think that's obviously very difficult to do, right? If people reach that spiritual enlightenment.
Sure.
But what I like to do is kind of my out is to think as God as like my friendly uncle who kind of, that's okay. You're a great kid. Don't worry about it. Everything will be fine, You kind of, you give you really, it's hard to live because if you look around you and you see, it's not really what people do. Mm-hmm. I tend to be a pessimist, but it's hard.
Sure.
Not because they're inherently bad. It's just, it's very difficult to do. And I think sometimes where a trap can fall in is that we surround ourselves with the ceremony of religion, whatever.
Well, I mean, how often
right?
is this really taught, too, honestly?
You're right, because it's a difficult thing to teach,
Right.
isn't it?
Yes.
It's a hard reality to grasp,
Sure.
so...
But again, we rely on God's mercy. Mm-hmm. But can we live a life? And St. Paul talks about this as his letters, I believe, to the Corinthians. So since grace abounds, should we continue to sin and sin and sin and sin and say, this is okay because we have an uncle in heaven and things are going to be all right.
It's the out.
Yeah.
It's like hiding behind forgiveness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so when you come to that point, this remembrance of death is like, yes, I know that I'm a sinner. I know that what I deserve is God's judgment, God's wrath, but I rely on His mercy, right? Hopefully, we've shown mercy to other people in the same measure that we want to have mercy to us. We've forgiven, we've loved in the same measure that we want to be loved ourselves. And then that's how we talk about that, when we come to the dread judgment seat of Christ, that we have a good accounting for ourselves. It won't be perfect, but hopefully it'll be good enough. That's my prayer.
I maybe want to say also beyond just kind of like we talked about earlier, seeing it in this terms of, being judged, right and wrong, this legal kind of thing. The remembrance of death is also, that a remembrance that everything that we kind of have going on in this world is temporal. The temporality of it, that we need to be focused on the eternal, and the fact that God's world, the way that God is, and the heavenly, pure life, that's eternal.
Sure.
That's forever. And there's really no way around that, And so we need to remind ourselves if we want to live forever, if we want to be with God forever, we better learn how. Learn how to do it, because that's how he is.
And that's what this life is, no matter how long or how short, is essentially that training ground.
Right.
And then every day is a struggle. Every
Sure.
day is a ladder of we're climbing one rung and maybe dropping back 3, and then catching up. I don't
Sure.
know. With me, sometimes it is.
Sure, it's a
People
struggle.
look at me really strange because it's a hard concept to grasp for Western society.
Yeah.
right? Especially because as we are more and more consumed by consumerism,
Sure.
that ever since I turned 50, I say, God, I'm glad it's half over.
You could be surprised. It's only
They
a
look
third
at me
over.
like, what do
Yeah.
you mean?
Third
It's
over.
half over, get it?
No.
And they go,
A third
and I'm
over.
like,
Only a third.
You know,
it's okay.
have you ever read, anybody here ever read, just for fun, the prayers of departing the soul and body? Everybody should read those before, at one point in their Orthodox life, because it really puts perspective what we're talking about here, and it makes you have not a fear of death, but just a remembrance of everything that you did in this life. I'm going to read just 3 verses from the canon, just to give you an idea how this is some of the most powerful prayers in Orthodoxy, but really give you an idea of what happens to you right as you're about to leave. So this is read to somebody that is on their deathbed, okay? Inasmuch as I foresaw this day from afar, O Lady, meditating ever upon it as though it were come, with hot tears I have prayed unto thee that thou wouldst not forget me. The assembly of the crafty, gaping, have encompassed me round about, and seeking to bear me away and bitterly torment me. Crush thou their teeth and jaws and save me, O pure one. So the demons are going to be circling round about as soon as you're ready to leave.
They're ready to get their due.
For as an organ of speech I am altogether extinguished, and my tongue is bound, and my eye closeth. In contrition of heart I entreat thee, deliver me and save me. Turn not from me thy many bounties. Shun not the bowels of thy love toward mankind, O pure one, but intercede for me now, and in the hour of judgment remember me. I mean, these are some of the most, I'll read one more. Point thou now a washing of sin, a stream of tears, O good one, receiving the contrition of my heart. In thee have I set my hope, O good one, when thou deliverest me from frightful fiery torment, for as much as thou art the fountain of grace, O birth giver of God. Just one day, go on the internet and just read these. And it will give you a completely different perspective on why we have to remember this moment. Your whole life should be spent preparing for these prayers to be said over you. And it'll give you a real big perspective on, and these are something completely foreign to the Western mind. These prayers,
yeah.
you know, if in the Western mind, I'm going to shut my eyes and I'm going to open and I'm going to be on a Serta mattress with grapes and these servants and, 40 virgins all over me, and all that other stuff. Like that's the Muslim.
Yeah.
But
70 is what I'm
70, I'm sorry.
I don't know about you, but
77.
Whatever. But
contracted, yeah.
But the point is check those out. No, very few Orthodox Christians, except for the priest, and then the people that are about to die, hear those prayers.
Oh, okay.
But everybody should read them at least once, and you could Google them and just put prayers of departing the soul and the body, and read them in a quiet place without any distraction, and just focus on what they're saying, and it'll completely change your perspective on how we view death. It'll completely change everything. So try that. It's a beautiful, beautiful prayer service. But it's also one of the hardest things to explain to people, because when I've been to the hospital and read these prayers over people, and you are reading these prayers, you try to kick them out of the room because when you're reading these prayers to people
you
that
don't want to have the relatives.
that don't understand what
it's
is
like,
going on.
what?
Right. It's really, it's powerful stuff too. So check it out just sometime. Just
Good,
on a side
good.
note.
So I'm just gonna end this part here on page 132. He says the main principle of the ascetic life is to make our body our friend rather than our enemy. So when we look at these things, and he's talking about the gluttony and all these other things that we do, it's not to punish our bodies, but to purify it and to make it our friends. I think that's a pretty good way of putting it, because a lot of times we see that as our enemy. I know with me, always trying to lose weight, it's like, so you go out there and you run on a treadmill until something breaks or hurts, and then I'm fouled up for the next, month or so. But it's because of that constant view of, all food, either being an enemy or something, bad food, good food, things like that, instead of looking at it from the standpoint that, everything that we put in our bodies we should give God thanks for it, everything in moderation, no gluttony. And I think that as he's stating here, will certainly help towards those issues of lust. So I wanted to go ahead and move on now. Is there anything we need to talk about that? I know we kind of ran over some ground we covered last week. Incidentally, that's like one of the longest chapters, that chapter 15. And if you pull up it's a lot of stuff.
And obedience. Remember, obedience is also, that's the longest one.
That's true. That's the other one. And if you take a look in the actual book of the ladder, you'll see that is a very, very long chapter. A lot of good stuff in there. So we're now on to step 16.
Did you read the last paragraph on that, though?
Which
This is the 15th reward of victory. He who has earned it while still alive has died and been resurrected. From now on, he has a taste of the immortality that's just to come. So if you've reached this step and all the other ones prior, you're doing pretty good. Most people don't get to this step in their lifetime.
Well, we're at 15, so we're halfway up that ladder. So that's very important. And so let's talk about what I'd like to try to do is, these are kind of two short chapters here, 16 and 17 on avarice and poverty. So 16, avarice. He says, avarice is a worship of idols and is the offspring of unbelief. The miser sneers at the gospel and is a deliberate transgressor. The man of charity spreads his money about him, but the man who claims to possess both charity and money is a self-deceived fool.
I should hand out the pledge cards after this.
And so I'm here on page 134. The first principle of Christian charity is that we should give in accordance with our ability. Now, a lot of times, and here he discusses that, and he also discusses in the ladder the topic of people who would claim, well, I want to become rich, so that way I can give more money to the poor.
No.
So what's wrong with that? I mean, if you say, Lord, I want to win the lottery, I want to win 100 million in the lottery, so I can give more to the poor. I mean, right now I can only give an amount because this is all I earn or whatever, but now, Lord, if you let me win that lottery, just think of all the good things I want to do for you,
No.
right?
It seems the more you make, the more you gain, the more you win, the tighter you hang on to it, the less you're...
The less you give.
Right.
And when you do give, what are you giving out of? Are you giving out of your poverty
Oh, no,
or out of
you're
your
giving
surplus?
to let people know you gave.
Right, I know, but I mean, okay, so I just won $100 million, all right, just for discussion.
But you're not really giving up.
Yeah, and I say, I'm going to give the church $10 million, and I'll blow the trumpets and everything like that, and say, wow. I mean, think about that. Most people probably can't turn around and say, write a check for $10 million like that. So, he's a very generous man. Well, what's he giving out? Is he giving out of his poverty or out of his wealth?
If you had given $110 million, then you gave
Then
something.
you gave, exactly.
But not, or even 100.
But you're really not then either, because that's not something you had.
But no.
That's something you won that was given to you.
No, Tina. He won 100 million. And if he gave 110 million, the 10 million came from his pocket.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if he had 80 million in the bank.
But yeah, okay, now you're dissecting. Now you're dissecting.
What about taxes?
Yes.
Too? Taxes.
Well, there you go. And I mean, come on.
The
Deacon,
person who
they
gives
just,
them poverty
they just
is
fell off the ladder.
Right.
giving,
They just
giving
fell off the
more.
ladder. You
Well, we
guys
should
want-
catch them and help
God,
them.
Let's help them back
proportional
up.
thing. It's a proportional concept.
And that's,
Give till it hurts. If it hurts, then.
yeah, give till it feels good, not till it hurts. Is what it is.
But I mean, but if people don't give to where it hurts.
Okay, so that's a good point. So what is the purpose of our giving then? What should it be?
What do you mean? Like,
What should giving be? Should just be
Talking
it's out
about
of
love.
love.
out of love, but what else? Very important concept of giving. It should be sacrificial.
Charity.
Sacrificial. Right? Sacrificial. Our giving should be sacrificial. Now, what does that mean to be sacrificial? I'm going to, when I
You're
say
giving up of yourself.
you're giving up of yourself.
You're giving back. You're giving back.
You're giving back, right. But I mean, that sacrifice, it has to be a point where, at least in my opinion, you're feeling it. Right? And that's the thing. So I know a lot of times people say, well, we should set up e-giving, where you turn around, it comes out of your check, just like your taxes or something like that. And it's good. Maybe it's helpful for some people, but for me, I don't like that idea because when I
You
see
saw
that,
my Facebook post today, didn't you?
what was it?
I've
I
had
did,
so many.
just before
I've
we-
had so many people ask me about that. I was like, "Whoa, would anybody be interested if I set this up?" Like that like the where it comes out of your
funds that you
account
give
every
it,
month or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, nothing wrong with that. That's great. But for me,
He
I
says
can,
that after I told him that.
I can feel that more, and it makes more sense to me because I'm seeing that come out. It's a matter of it's like okay, here's your money. Now we treat it like a bill, but I mean still it's like okay, here's a check, and I see that coming out. If it came off the top without me even seeing it,
It's like your taxes.
But you wouldn't
And there's
notice.
much more to
Just expect it.
giving.
yeah,
There's much more to this than just giving money, though.
right.
I mean, several of it, none of us are rich by any means, but you could easily sit down and write a check to the charity down the street every month. But you don't feel that, you don't know that.
Right.
So for me, I want to physically be there. I want to do something. I want to, instead of just handing them over money, say, here you go.
Sure. And that's
Now my conscience feels better. I feel good,
Right. And that's one of the things of that giving is, and as we talk about, like with CIA.
See, I was just gonna say, why don't you come see us at CIA?
And it's the same thing. It's making that personal connection because it is easy enough to turn around and say, we have these needs within the church, or we have like the famous one is a little orphans running around somewhere out there. And agreed, that money. But what about if you can write that check and maybe do something physically to help them? Right. I mean, maybe you can't fly out to wherever and be there, but maybe there's something more that you can do. Maybe like the boxes or something like that, but something that's real and tangible that you can relate to that giving a little bit better. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate anything that anyone's been doing, but just to think about that. And again, this comes back to taking it up to another level.
Here's your preview for your stewardship letter this year is that the Old Testament model called for 10% of your financial income. The New Testament model calls for 100% of yourself. There's a big difference
yeah,
in both of those. So just like Christ called for you not just to commit adultery, but to stop it from even going into your head, we not only have to support the church in a financial way, but we have to support the church community and the parish with 100% of everything that we have. Not financially, but with everything, with our prayer, with our work, with our dedication, with the things that we do.
Any talent.
Any talents, everybody pulls their part. And that's one beautiful thing that drew me to this church is that everybody, even Brigitte, cuts the hedges. That's her thing. That's her sacrifice of love.
Yeah.
Of the front.
She's obsessed with the privets.
Right. But that's her thing. Everybody has something that they do. But anyway, avarice is more about material things. But.
More about material things, right? And it's a matter of again getting your head, and I would say your heart, in the right place. Page 135 up here. I'm just looking at all these things I circled and scratched out. He says, as Saint Basil the Great writes, "Are you poor? You know someone who is even poorer. Do not shrink from giving what little you have. Do not prefer your own benefit to remedying the common distress." Now, I when I read about this, I kind of think about here, especially in the United States, and the level, how we've raised the level of poverty. And again, when you look at and read about people in other places about poor, or like when I was stationed down in Georgia, Fort Hood, Georgia, and down in the Carolinas and stuff. I mean, traveling some of those back roads, man, I'm looking at this, I'm going, whoa, these people are defining poverty. Now, I don't know what assistance I get or anything like that, but I mean, literally, a shack and nothing else, and a bunch of little kids running around. They may be sharecroppers or something like that, but I mean, really, and when I see the poor up here, with the cell phones and the nails, and clothing and stuff like that, I mean, I know a lot of it has to do with availability of the resources. They just don't have them in some of those rural areas, you know, where you can get
When
that.
we were in Jamaica one year, here we are on this elaborate vacation, and we took a horse ride up through the mountains, and they took us through a little village like that, honest, the shed in our backyard was nicer than what these people lived in.
Yeah.
It was so sad, and they had this little open shed, like, and that was their bar. They had a few liquor bottles set up there and a checkerboard in the middle and this little transistor radio that the guys after working in the fields would come and
That
have a
was
couple
their-
drinks but you know, these kids were happy. They were. They come running out to the path to see the horses and would want to pet the horses, and they were clean.
Yeah.
They were happy little kids. They didn't, and we talked about that afterwards. They didn't have all
You don't need it.
the stress. Yeah,
To be
they
honest
didn't
with
know what they were missing, and they didn't have all the pressures and stresses
There you go, yeah.
that our kids faced every day. You know, so then you're thinking, which one's better off?
It can create it has created a lot of problems that they're trying to understand now for just, again, our consumer society
Mhm.
in North America. It creates a very complex
Yeah.
set of dynamics socially and spiritually and everything
Sure.
else.
Well, he says in the book here that children are an excuse to satisfy, we need to have money to take care of our children. But that's not true.
But there's a difference between need and want.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's there on
Just
page
says
135, and that's very good, Helen, because that was something here. It's the words of St. Basil. But wealth is necessary for rearing children, someone will say. This is a spacious excuse for greed. Although we speak as though children were your concern, you betray the inclinations of your own heart. Do not impute guilt on the guiltless. So we're saying, don't blame it on your kids.
Right.
They have their own master who cares for their needs. They received their being from God, and God will provide for what they need to live. Was the command found in the gospel? If you wish to be perfect, sell your possessions and give the money to the poor, not written for the married? After seeking the blessing of children from the Lord and being found worthy to become parents, did you at once add the following? Give me children that I might disobey your commandments. Give me children that I might not attain the kingdom of heaven. So, and I know, I mean, you know, we gotta admit, when we were first married, that was one of the considerations. Do we have enough money to be able to afford to raise kids? I mean, that to me was, I thought, a very prudent thing. But then I found that I never had money to raise those kids, and I mean, they're just, you know, God bless them, but man, they take a lot of money. But it always seems like, and we were able to do it on a single income the whole time, just because we set expectations very low, and we lived up to them. Yeah.
Aim
But
low.
I mean, that's the thing. It's if you turn around and say, "Gee, poor kid, you don't have the latest." The big thing then was video games. They didn't really have cell phones quite so much, but you don't have the latest video game like all your friends have. Then they realize how bad off they are. So we didn't make a big thing of it. And if they asked, it's like, no, we didn't think it was a good thing. But I mean, the whole point is that you never have enough money to raise the kids the way you think you should, just like you never have enough money to live in the manner that you think you should live. I'm sorry, I just always think about, it's a quote credited to Rockefeller, where someone asked him, they said, he was Johnny Rockefeller at the turn of the century, richest man in the whole world, Standard Oil and stuff like that. And they said, Mr. Rockefeller, how much is enough? Because you have all this money. How much is enough? His answer was a little more. And that is kind of like how we think about everything.
Keeps going.
Just a little more. Not a lot more, right? If you're making 100,000, well, maybe 110,000.
That'd be good.
I'm not asking for a whole lot more. Then once you make 110, well, maybe 120 will be okay, or 150, 200. Yeah,
Sliding
exactly.
scale.
Exactly. That's what it is. Whatever you have is not enough. It's the same thing. Same with the kids, and that's where that whole idea of avarice comes from. That's where the whole thing comes from, is that whatever you have is never enough. And when you cannot let go of that, then that's where the whole sin of that avarice comes in. Right? Anything on that, 'cause I wanted to get into poverty as well. We have about another 15,
I have
20
one,
minutes.
well, Scott and I have had this conversation before about this. And I said, so then why are we living in this house that we're living in? Why do we have a pool? Why am I driving in a new car? We should get rid of all this. I should be walking to work and living in a tent.
Or tiny house.
Yeah.
Good show.
Well, I had that. I had the same thought when I went to seminary. I had, because I came from being a financial advisor, so I was making really, really good money, and we had a lot of money in the savings that we used to pay off a lot of debt before we go to seminary. And I still had a cushion because I knew that we were going to be living on food stamps. So I had a nice cushion in the bank, and I remember going there, and we had all this. We had accumulated stuff from the wedding and had all this nice stuff, and we moved into a small little apartment. We had all of our nice fancy furniture, and then there's these guys in my class that are coming from Washington, and they shove everything that they have into a Yugo, okay,
With room to spare.
and they and then they drive down. Yugo's too small. They drive across country with $30 in their account, and they say, "Into your hands I commit my spirit." I remember struggling with that when I went to seminary. It's like, here I am, and I've got 15 grand in a savings, that this is supposed to last me for the next 3 years. And I was like, I'm about to give it all to the poor, and then just go and rough it. And one of my spiritual fathers, I'm trying to just rack my head about what he told me about that. He said, God only gives you what you need, and you have to, and he gives you no more, he gives you no less. He's like, for those people that came there, that's what they need at this moment. Now your desire should not be to go and get more and accumulate more, but he gave you at the time what you need. So just because you have all these things, it's not a sin within itself. It's how you allow those things to control your life is where the sin comes into play. So the rich man in the story, everybody's like, well, he told him to sell, in the gospel, told him to sell everything that he has, because that means it's a sin to be rich, right? No, he told him to sell everything he had because he knew that those possessions were what ruled his life, not so much how much he had, So these are just small things that we have to struggle with in our.
So Tina, if you really wanted to, you could walk to work. We know you can.
Yeah.
But it's
I have brought my bike. Does that count?
If you want to sell your car and donate it to the Annex Project,
Oh, that's
give me a call.
and your pool. I don't know how that's going to work out, but someone could take your pool.
The grandkids might have something to say about the pool.
You can't use your grandkids.
Oh, that's there.
Don't even do that, Tina.
Yeah, see?
I said they might have something to say about it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, oh,
I thought you were going to say I did it for the grandkids.
Oh, no.
But yeah, so that's a very good point, because a lot of times you see that. I mean, I know of people, like when I was doing the St. Stephen's course, I was very surprised to find there were several people there who had been ministers, like in the Lutheran church or something like that. There were a lot of Lutherans there when I was there. And they had been pastors for like 20 years. They were making very good salaries in the Lutheran church. They had a retirement and everything, and they just gave it all away. And it's not like they were like at retirement age or something like that. They were young. They were probably at a point where it might have been kind of dangerous, because a lot of them were in their their late 30s, early 40s. They had children that were coming up to college age, things like that. And so, I think about the same thing. I'm thinking, wow, would I be able to do something like that? That is, talk about leap of faith. And that's what they did. They gave it all up, and they packed up Mom and the kids and trundled out to St. Vladimir's or St. Tikhon's or wherever they went. And
No, if they went to Vlad's, they had money. If you went to see.
Oh. So, but yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that,
And he, like I said, he always gives you what you need. And those people, they couldn't pay electric bill for three months, and a check would show up at their doorstep. It's incredible. And that happened to us a couple times. When Laura went into maternity leave, we had no income, and all that money that we had saved was blown, because you start to use it when you're not making.
$15,000 is not a lot of money
It's not anymore.
for that.
But when Lucy came and we had nothing, it was right around Christmas time at a parish. We didn't ask, we didn't do anything, raised $1,500 in grocery store gift cards and sent it to our house. And that got us through. So God provides when you need it, and
that's a good point.
That's just he gives you what you need when you need it.
And I think that's a good idea, because that does put it in perspective, because, you look and go, well, I don't have a freezer full of food or something like that, or a refrigerator full of food, but when I need to eat,
It's there.
it's there. God
Now,
provides
remember
somehow.
this in December when we do a Christmas collection for the seminarian kids that don't get Christmases because their parents are at seminary and can't afford it. And when we take a collection for that, and I ask for presents for these kids, let's just remember this story because that we got
That's a really good idea.
that happened to us a couple times. The FOCA sent gifts for Lucy and for us because we couldn't afford. And those are some of the best Christmases we ever had, ever. You know, so keep these in mind. Keep these in mind. We have
Very
to pay.
good.
I get to pay
You
it
might have
forward.
to remind us to.
Oh, I will. We'll do a big thing in December
Yeah.
for.
No, I think that'd be a very nice.
That's
very
our
good idea.
December. That'll be our December thing.
Yep. So step 17. Let's see if we can finish up this poverty. So it says.
Speaking of which,
Speaking of which, the man who has tasted the things of heaven daily thinks nothing of what is below. But he who has no taste of heaven finds pleasure in possessions. So it gets back to what you're talking about. He who dies with the most toys wins. One of those things, constantly grabbing. So poverty, when we talk about poverty, what are we talking about? I mean, again, this is just like with chastity, we always think about it in terms of sex. Poverty, we always think about it in terms of possessions. But how else can we have poverty? How else can we be poor?
Spirit.
Blessed are those who poor in spirit, yeah. In spirit. And I guess the question comes up, as Father brought up about Jesus and the rich man. Is it possible to be poor in spirit but still be rich, to be wealthy, as it were?
Oh, yeah.
It's possible.
more difficult.
It seems like it's kind of related to detachment. Was that one of the first
Yes.
steps?
Mhm. Yes.
It's kind of, well, it harkens back to that.
Exactly. And yeah, and like I said, it's not impossible. It's not impossible at all. Jesus said it is harder, it's more difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than
Than a
the
camel
that
to
goes
enter
through the
the
eye of a needle. And then what did everybody say? Whoa! If the rich can't make it, because that's how the concept was. And even now, a lot of times, if you look at I always like to read and hear about that prosperity theology. I don't know, has that run its course yet? Anybody follow Benny? I mean, I don't know if it's run its course yet, but that used to be the big thing.
It's still going.
Is it still going?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Turn on TCT and they got their,
I know they're always
their whole
harping on
thing.
money.
Yeah, it's the
Boy.
seed thing,
Yeah, plant the seed. Plant the seed.
which means give us money.
Yeah.
What is this?
Prosperity gospel type stuff. It's the evangelistic.
Usually television.
Raise money.
Yeah, usually televangelists and stuff.
Raise money.
That's,
Yeah, but the interesting thing about it is they refer to it as a seed, and they say if you plant your seed, then God will, you'll
Reward
harvest
for-
more,
yeah.
based on how big your seed is that you
Right.
plant, you'll harvest. So they're basically what they're offering is money. They're
Yeah.
saying that God's going to give you
More money.
More
yeah,
money.
More, right.
There's not really any much of a spiritual blessing involved, that you're
we got to
giving.
admire them. They're right out there with it.
Yeah.
It's all about money.
Getting the
And that's the whole thing where it's viewed. They say, well, if you're really a believer, if you're really blessed by God, you'd be rich. That's the bottom line. I mean, look at the Bible. All these people, Abraham was rich. All these people who were blessed by God were rich. King David, Joseph ended
It's
up
like
rich.
the book of Job doesn't exist.
Exactly.
That drives me so
any of
crazy.
the prophets,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Elijah
and the
Elisha,
prophets,
yeah.
they're
The prophets,
all
yeah.
out there
None of that
starving.
exists.
St. John the Baptist. I don't
There you
remember
go.
Jesus. He was kind of an important figure. I don't
Yeah,
remember him having just loads of cash.
Right. But I mean, that doesn't sell. Poverty. You
Right.
can't run a television station.
Suffering and poverty does not sell.
It does
you know?
not sell
You're
good
right.
at all. So we have to sell prosperity, and that's essentially what they do. And,
I don't wanna
and
sell
there's all those different hooks. There's the plant the seed.
sounds hard.
There is there's a couple other ones. The same thing when they do that little pyramid scheme thing where you send them. What they'll do is you send them $1 and they turn around and they send the $1 back and they say, give us $49 more and make it 50. Well, okay, so you send them $49, they'll turn around and give you $1 back and say, and it's just a weird little scheme that they kind of play. There's all these different things, and this is what some churches are actually doing. It's really, really sad.
Don't give them the dignity of calling them a church.
That's why I went air quotes. But, hey, they raise money, they have a huge building, they have a television station.
Maybe we could fund our annex project.
I think we could. Plant the seed. But we did do the lease.
Bruce, you give me 2,000, and I'll give you 1.
I'll give you
4,000, and I'll give you 2.
give you 2. And
Such a
that's how you
deal.
do
And
it.
that ratio is a symbolic number of.
There you go.
Of-
You gotta get into
the
that.
profit.
Well, you give me the 2, and then I'll loan Bruce 1,000.
So he can give it to you. Wow, I like the way that.
Done.
And where's Bernie Madoff?
Yeah, that's right.
Page 139, it says, the principle of Christian charity is not the more we have, the more we give, but rather the less we need, the more we give. What a concept. The principle of Christian charity is not the more we have, the more we give, but rather the less we need, the more we give. I remember someone telling me years ago, and I can't remember who it was,
That's an awesome.
and it's awesome. And what he told me was, it's not how much you make, it's how much you spend. And I kind of thought there for a minute, and I went, you know what? That is probably, and that's the thing that I always keep in my mind. It's not how much you make, it's how much you spend. You can, I mean, anytime you go into ESPN or something like that, they always have the latest sports figure who was a multi-million billionaire through all these different things, and somehow, by the age of 40, managed to blow it all,
Yeah.
and is now, on Skid Row, a drug addict or something like that. And you see that with people all the time. You don't have to look too far. You say, well, wait a minute. I felt that if I could make $1 million, that would be it. I'd be set. I wouldn't ask God for anything else. God, give me $1 million and I'll be done with it. But it doesn't matter. It's always a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And that's the kind of thing that you see. And I know sometimes it's hard. You work, you judge the value of what you do. At least, I do. I mean, I'll be honest, by how much money I make. Or I look at, how come somebody else who doesn't work as hard or is as smart or as good looking as I am, and they're making more money at work, how come? They've never accomplished, you have a tendency, I have a tendency, and that's where the Jesus parasite comes in.
Vanity.
Vanity, yeah, absolutely.
Vanity. Where was that one?
Because that's the whole thing. It's not how much you make, it's how much you spend. And here, but rather, the less we need, the more we give. So, even if you do, maybe if you are blessed to make $1 million a year, right? How much of that do you really give away? How much of that do you turn around and say, look, I need a house, I need a car, gotta have a truck, gotta have my camper, gotta have my boat, all those necessities of life.
RV.
But RV, yeah, all these things are necessities of life. But I mean, how much of that do I really, really need, and how much can I use this, not only my money, but also my time? Because again, a lot of times the people who, have a lot of money are always, constantly working, constantly being controlled by that, working overtime, I know people who work several jobs. It's like, well, why are you working? You leave there and you go work, for salary. I mean, what am I doing here? But yeah, even when you work afterwards, I said, well, yeah, I want to get more money, This is kind of grabbing with both hands. I don't know what their financial situation is, but, sometimes, and if you turn around and say, well, maybe if you, instead of think about having to make more money to be able to afford more things, maybe cut down on the things you have and see how that works out, and see if you can actually meet the tithe. And that's really what we're talking about here. I just thought that was very telling. Bottom of 139, St. John Chrysostom reminds us that those who practice voluntary poverty are the ones who are truly rich, because they are free of the need of worldly concerns. If you see someone greedy for many things, this is a quote here, you should consider him the poorest of all, even if he has acquired everyone's money. If, on the other hand, you see someone who has few needs, you should count him the richest of all, even if he has acquired nothing. For we are accustomed to judge poverty and affluence by the disposition of the mind, not by the measure of one's substance.
Boom.
So that's a very, very interesting way of doing it. Yes, ma'am.
I read something in relationship to the poverty chapter. I think it was, they quoted the gentleman from Schindler's List. If he had,
Yes,
It's in here.
is that in here?
It's, I could have gotten more, I could have gotten out more, I could have gotten more, I threw away so much money, you have no idea, this car, oh God, what
Yes.
about this
Yeah,
car?
okay, then I thought I read.
I always
it
tear up
somewhere.
at that part of the movie.
Yes.
Isn't that the worst part? You just
It
start
is so
bawling.
sad.
The whole thing's
Yeah.
a mess.
Yeah, but the end, that scene is the one that just grips you.
Yeah, there it is, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, we praise him for all he's done and all this other stuff, but when he really puts it in perspective is like he said, you know what? That car, that could have got out 10 people. That gold, that pen, these jewelries, these baubles and stuff like that, that could have saved a life.
Well, even when I know I look at some of these donations that are asked of us, 49 cents could feed a family, or 59 cents could feed a child for a week. What are you feeding this child for 59 cents for a week? I mean, if that takes so little, how much could $5.90, and how many more children can we feed with that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, we fed here 250, and it was a buck a meal. He was saying it was like a, you know.
But it was all,
Oh come on,
What
it
did
was
you-
some
what
of it was
did you
okay.
put in there, Father?
They had a rice casserole. Oh, okay, it wasn't the healthiest, but it was food, you know. Rice casserole, granola bars, cereal, like a fruit snack, and a couple other things.
Fruit Loops.
Fruit just won't do it anymore. They'll teach you.
Rice and beans, that's probably what they
Fruit
feed them
snacks.
for 59 cents.
Yeah, rice and
Yeah,
beans.
sometimes maybe that's all they can get too. you
Maybe
know,
we'll get them
they may-
steaks next time. How about that, Rebecca?
They'll probably have diarrhea from it because they're not used
See?
to that. They're not accustomed to that quality of that
All
kind
right,
of
all
food.
right. Moving right along. Yeah, in the latter book here, page 187. This is something I know it's back on the
Sharing that. I didn't even
on
have
the
it.
chapter of avarice, but still I think it can also apply as well on poverty. Where St. John writes, it says, "Do not say that you are interested in money for the sake of the poor." And then he makes the point: "For 2 mites were insufficient to purchase the kingdom." He's talking about the widow's mites. So I think that's quite interesting. So
Isn't that next week's gospel?
yeah, that's just not this.
Next week.
So, yeah, it's the widow's mite. I mean, that's the kind of thing. When you give, because she was commended. Why? Because she gave out of her poverty. That gets back to the same thing we were talking about before. You know, if you have $100 million and give 10 million, well, that's great. But you're giving out of your abundance. It doesn't lessen the fact that $10 million can feed a lot of people. You know, juice boxes and candy bars and stuff for them. But I mean, the point, yeah, starches. But the point is that if you're looking at it from the standpoint of your own personal salvation, then you need to look at that sacrificial part of the giving. And yeah, give till it feels good, not till it hurts. So, anything else there on poverty? So we covered quite a bit of ground tonight. We did finished up. We talked about lust. We talked about avarice, and we talked about poverty. So next week, chapter 18. Now this gets into a whole new section in the book, so I think this is a good part to take over again. Part 5 on spiritual passions, continued. We're going to talk about insensitivity and lack of awareness. Kind of like me being clueless, wandering around life, not realizing how much you're hurting other people. So we'll pick it up there. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Deacon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's say our prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. It is truly we to bless you, O Theotokos, ever Virgin Mary, and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and more glorious beyond compare than the seraphim. Without defilement you gave birth to God the Word. True Theotokos, we magnify you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
Saint John.